Princess Nari pressed her face against the cool crystal window of her tower. Far below, the human ship was landing on the golden platform of Kepler Prime. The ship looked small and simple compared to the huge Vorthak vessels floating nearby. She could see tiny figures walking down the ramp. Today she would meet her husband. The marriage had been arranged by the Council of Elders. The humans wanted to trade with the Vorthak Empire. The Vorthak wanted the rare metals from Earth. A royal marriage would seal the deal and make everyone happy. At least that was what Elder HFY had told her. Nari had seen pictures of humans before. They looked weak and soft compared to her people. The Vorthak were tall and strong, with silver skin that sparkled in the light. Humans had pink or brown skin and seemed very fragile. They had only just learned to travel between stars. The Vorthak had been doing it for thousands of years. "Princess, it is time," said Myung, her closest friend. Myung was also a noble, daughter of Commander Dalsu. She had been chosen to help Nari prepare for the wedding. Nari wore her finest dress. It was made from star silk that changed colors as she moved. The fabric cost more than most planets, made in a year. Her jewelry was carved from crystals found only in the heart of dying stars. She looked like what she was, the most important princess in the galaxy. The great hall was full of Vorthak nobles. They whispered to each other behind, jeweled fans. Everyone wanted to see the human who would marry their princess. The walls were covered with ancient tapestries showing the glory of the Vorthak Empire. Golden lights floated in the air, casting everything in a warm glow. Ambassador Tai Ho entered first. He was an older human with gray hair and kind eyes. He bowed deeply to the assembled nobles. Behind him came other humans all wearing simple black clothes. They looked nervous and excited. Then Nari saw him. Woojin walked at the back of the group. He was taller than the other humans, but still shorter than most Vorthak. His black hair was cut short and neat. His clothes were plain but clean. What struck Nari most was how quietly he moved. His feet made no sound on the crystal floor. His hands hung relaxed at his sides, but it was his eyes that made her pause. When he looked up at her, she felt something strange. His eyes were dark and deep, like looking into a still pond at night. There was something old in those eyes, something that did not match his young face. Elder HFY stepped forward to begin the ceremony. He was ancient even by Vorthak standards, his silver skin now pale with age. His voice echoed through the hall. "Today we join two peoples in peace," he began. "The great Vorthak Empire and our new friends from Earth. This marriage will bring prosperity to both worlds." The other Vorthak nobles nodded and smiled. They were pleased with this arrangement. The humans would give them metals and ask for very little in return. It was a good deal. Ambassador Taeho spoke next. "We are honored by this union. The people of Earth look forward to learning from the wise Vorthak." Nari noticed that Woojin said nothing. He just stood quietly, watching everything with those deep, dark eyes. When spoken to, he nodded politely but offered no words of his own. The ceremony began. Nari and Woojin walked to the center of the hall. Ancient Vorthak tradition required them to join hands and speak the binding words. As their fingers touched, Nari felt something unexpected. His hands were not soft like she had expected. There were small scars on his fingers and palms. His skin was warm and dry. Most surprising of all, she could feel his heartbeat through his wrist. It was slow and steady, never changing, even as her own heart raced with nervousness. "Do you accept this union?" Elder HFY asked Nari. "I do," she replied, her voice clear and strong. "Do you accept this union?" he asked Woojin. "I do," Woojin said quietly. His voice was deeper than she had expected, with a strange accent she could not place. The golden rings were brought forward. They were made from metal found only on the Vorthak homeworld. Once placed on their wrists, the rings would glow softly, showing that they were married. The rings could never be removed except by death. As the ring closed around her wrist, Nari felt its warmth. She looked at Woojin as his ring was placed. For just a moment, she thought she saw something flicker across his face. It was too quick to understand, but it made her think of lightning behind storm clouds. The feast that followed was magnificent. Tables groaned under the weight of exotic foods from across the galaxy. Musicians played beautiful melodies that floated through the air like living things. The Vorthak nobles laughed and told stories, enjoying themselves greatly. Wu Jin ate very little. He tasted each dish politely but seemed more interested in watching the people around him. When nobles tried to talk to him, he answered with just a few words. They soon gave up and talked around him instead. "Your husband is very quiet," whispered Commander Dalsu to Nari. "Most humans we have met are much more talkative. Perhaps he is nervous," Nari replied, though she was not sure that was true. "Or perhaps he knows his place," laughed General So Min. "The humans are wise to send us their most obedient one." Nari glanced at Wu Jin. He was cutting his food with careful, precise movements. His knife never made a sound against the plate. She noticed that he held the utensil differently than everyone else, more like a tool than a simple eating instrument. As the evening wore on, Nari found herself stealing glances at her new husband. He never seemed to relax, even when the other humans were laughing at Ambassador Tejo's jokes. His eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the room, every face, every movement. When a servant accidentally dropped a crystal glass behind them, everyone jumped at the sudden noise. Everyone except Wu Jin. He had already turned toward the sound before the glass hit the floor, his body tense and ready. Only when he saw it was just an accident did he relax again. "You have good reflexes," Nari said to him quietly. "I try to stay alert," he replied with a small smile. That night, as Nari lay in her bed alone, Vorthak custom required married couples to spend their first week apart to think about their new life together. She thought about her strange new husband. The other humans seemed normal enough, eager to please and excited about the trade agreements. But Wu Jin was different. There was something about him that did not fit with what she knew about humans. The way he moved, the way he watched, the scars on his hands. None of it matched the image of peaceful farmers and miners that the humans had presented. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Nari wondered what secrets lay behind those deep, dark eyes. 3 months had passed since the wedding, and Nari was no closer to understanding her husband. They now lived together on Nexus Station, a massive space city that served as the center of Vorthak trade. The station was beautiful, with gardens that floated in zero gravity and windows that showed the stars in all directions. Every morning, Wu Jin woke before the artificial sunrise. Nari had started waking early too, just to watch him. He would dress quietly in simple clothes and leave their rooms without saying where he was going. When she asked, he would smile and say he was going to meditate. "Humans meditate?" Mi Young asked one afternoon as they sat in the station's crystal garden. Flowers from 100 worlds grew around them in impossible colors. "Apparently," Nari replied, watching a blue butterfly the size of her hand flutter past. "Though I have never seen what kind of meditation he does." "Why not ask to join him?" Mi Young suggested. "Married couples should share such things." Nari had thought about it many times, but something held her back. There was a quality to Wu Jin's silence that warned her not to push too hard. It was like the quiet before a thunderstorm, heavy with hidden power. Commander Dalsu had been keeping track of Wu Jin's activities, as was his job. All visitors to the station were monitored, even royal husbands. What he found was strange enough to mention to Nari. "Your husband spends most of his time in the old cargo bay on level 7, Dalsu reported. "He has also requested access to our historical archives." "What kind of history?" Nari asked. "Military records mostly, ancient battles, weapon designs, combat tactics from the early wars." Dalsu frowned. It seems an odd interest for a farmer. That evening, Nari decided to ask Wu Jin directly. They were eating dinner in their private dining room, a small space with a view of the nebula that surrounded the station. The purple and gold gases swirled slowly outside the window like liquid light. "I hear you have been studying our military history," she said, trying to sound casual. Wu Jin looked up from his food. "Yes. I find your culture fascinating. I want to understand your people better." Most newlyweds study art or music to understand their spouse's culture, Nari pointed. Out. Why warfare? A people's history of conflict reveals much about their character, Wu Jin replied. How they fight shows who they really are. There was something in the way he said it that made Nari pause. It sounded like the words of someone who had thought deeply about fighting, not just read about it in books. A few days later, they attended a formal dinner with visiting dignitaries. Commander Kyung-ho had arrived from the outer territories with news of increased pirate activity. He was a large Vorthak, with scars across his silver face, earned in battles against raiders and criminals. During the meal, Kyung-ho began telling stories of his victories. As the wine flowed, his stories became more boastful and crude. The problem with humans, Kyung-ho said loudly, his words slightly slurred, is that they have no backbone. They surrender at the first sign of trouble. No warrior spirit at all. The other Vorthak at the table laughed and nodded. Ambassador Taeho looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Nari glanced at Wu Jin, expecting him to be upset by the insult. Instead, Wu Jin continued eating calmly. But Nari noticed his grip tighten on his eating knife. The metal utensil began to bend under his fingers. She watched in amazement as the strong Vorthak steel slowly curved out of shape. Of course, Kyung-ho continued, not noticing. That makes them perfect for mining and farming. Leave the real work to real warriors. Wu Jin set down his ruined utensil and picked up a new one. His face showed nothing but polite interest. When Kyung-ho looked at him directly, Wu Jin even smiled and nodded as if agreeing with the insults. But Nari had seen the bent knife. She had felt the controlled anger radiating from her husband like heat from a fire. For just a moment, she had glimpsed something dangerous beneath his calm surface. That night, she could not sleep. Questions raced through her mind. How had Wu Jin bent solid metal with just his fingers? Why did he hide his anger so completely? What was he really doing during those long meditation sessions? Unable to rest, Nari got up and walked through the quiet corridors of the station. Her bare feet made soft sounds on the warm metal floors. She found herself heading toward level 7, to the old cargo bay where Wu Jin spent his mornings. The corridor was dark and empty. Most of this section was unused now, left over from when the station had been smaller and less grand. She could see light coming from under the door of the cargo bay. Moving quietly, Nari approached the door. There was a small observation window made of thick crystal. She pressed her face against it and looked inside. What she saw took her breath away. Wu Jin stood in the center of the empty bay. He had removed his shirt and she could see that his human body was covered in old scars. But it was not the scars that amazed her. It was how he moved. He was dancing. No, not dancing. Fighting. But fighting against invisible opponents with movements so fluid and perfect that it looked like a deadly dance. His body flowed from one position to another without pause, each motion precise and powerful. Nari watched as her quiet husband spun and struck at empty air. She could almost see the enemies he was fighting, the way he ducked and weaved around attacks that were not there. His hands moved as if holding weapons, cutting and thrusting with incredible speed. Then she realized something that made her heart race. Wu Jin was moving too fast for a normal person. His actions were a blur, his reflexes inhuman. What she had thought was a peaceful meditation was actually combat training at a level that defied everything she knew about human abilities. As she watched, frozen in shock, Wu Jin suddenly stopped. He turned toward the observation window and looked directly at her. For a moment, their eyes met through the crystal, and Nari saw something that terrified and thrilled her at the same time. In that instant, Wu Jin's careful mask had slipped. The quiet, polite husband was gone. In his place stood something ancient and dangerous, something that had killed before and would kill again without hesitation. His dark eyes held depths of violence and skill that belonged in legends, not in the body of a simple human farmer. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the mask returned. Wu Jin smiled slightly and walked toward the door. Nari stepped back as he emerged, now wearing his shirt again. He looked exactly like the gentleman she had married, but she knew she would never see him the same way again. "I could not sleep," she said, her voice barely steady. Neither could I, he replied quietly. Sometimes old habits are hard to break. What kind of habits? She asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. Wu Jin looked at her for a long moment. In the dim corridor light, his scarred hands looked like those of a craftsman who had worked with very dangerous tools. The kind that keep people safe, he said finally, even when they do not know they need protecting. As they walked back to their rooms together, Nari's mind raced with new questions. What was Wu Jin protecting them from? And more importantly, what exactly was hiding behind the quiet mask of her human husband? The alarms started screaming at dawn. Nari woke to red lights flashing in their bedroom and the sound of emergency broadcasts echoing through the station. Beside her, Wu Jin was already sitting up, instantly alert in a way that no longer surprised her. Emergency council meeting in 1 hour, the station's computer announced. All senior personnel report immediately. Within minutes, reports were flooding in from across the outer colonies. The Zephyrian raiders had struck 3 worlds at once, their bioships appearing out of nowhere like a plague of insects. The colony of New Harvest was already gone. Its 6 million inhabitants vanished without a trace. Nari dressed quickly and headed for the council chambers. As a princess, she had a right to attend all emergency meetings. Wu Jin followed, still, quiet, but somehow more focused than usual. The great council chamber was in chaos when they arrived. Dozens of Vorthak nobles and military officers shouted at each other, their voices echoing off the crystal walls. At the center of it all sat Elder He Wan, his ancient face grim with worry. "Order!" he called, striking his staff against the floor. "We will have order." Commander Kyung-ho stood at the main display, which showed a map of the affected systems. Red marks indicated worlds under attack or already lost. The pattern was spreading toward the inner colonies like a disease. "The situation is worse than we first thought," Kyung-ho announced. "The Zephyrians have some kind of new technology. Our shields are useless against their weapons. 3 full battle fleets have been destroyed trying to stop them." A murmur of fear ran through the assembly. The Zephyrian raiders were known throughout the galaxy as savage killers, but they had never been this powerful before. Their bioships were grown rather than built, covered in living armor that could adapt to different weapons. But the Vorthak military had always been strong enough to keep them at bay. "What do you recommend?" Elder Haywan asked. "We evacuate the outer colonies," General So-min said bluntly. "Pull back to the core worlds and hope we can hold them there." "That means abandoning 20 billion people," shouted another noble. "Better than losing them all to the raiders," Kyung-ho replied. "The Zephyrians take no prisoners. Everyone knows what they do to captured worlds." Nari had heard the stories. The Zephyrians did not just kill their enemies, they consumed them, literally eating the populations of conquered worlds. Their bioships fed on organic matter, growing stronger with each victory. As the argument grew louder, Nari noticed that Wu Jin had gone very still beside her. His hands were clenched in his lap, and there was a strange tension in his shoulders. She had learned to read these small signs over the past months. Her husband was angry, though he showed no outward sign of it. "We need a miracle," General So-min said finally, slamming her fist on the table. "Or we are going to lose half our territory to these monsters." It was then that Wu Jin spoke, his quiet voice somehow carrying clearly across the room despite all the shouting. "What if I told you that humans have dealt with the Zephyrians before?" The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to look at the small human sitting beside the princess. Ambassador Taeho, who had been quiet until now, suddenly looked very uncomfortable. "Elder." Haewon frowned. "Humans? Your people barely have interstellar flight. When could you possibly have encountered the raiders?" 200 years ago, Wu Jin said, standing slowly. "When they first came to our system, the Vorthak nobles began to laugh. The idea was ridiculous. 200 years ago, humans had not even left their home planet. How could they have fought space raiders? They came to Earth when we were still using chemical rockets," Wu Jin continued, his voice growing stronger. "We had no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light travel. We were exactly what you think we are, farmers and miners living on one small world. Then how did you survive? Commander Kyung-ho asked mockingly. Did you throw rocks at their bioships? Wu Jin's smile was sharp and cold. Something like that. Ambassador Taeho stood up suddenly. Wu Jin, perhaps this is not the time. This is exactly the time, Wu Jin interrupted. Nari had never heard him speak so firmly before. They deserve to know what they are really facing. What do you mean? Elder Haewon asked, his ancient eyes narrowing. The Zephyrians do not respect technology, Wu Jin explained. They have bioships that can adapt to any weapon, absorb any energy attack, heal from any damage. Technology alone cannot defeat them. They respect only one thing. Which is? General So-min demanded. Strength. Pure, simple, physical strength. The willingness to close with the enemy and fight them hand to hand, blade to blade, until one side is dead. The Vorthak looked at each other uncertainly. Their entire military was based on advanced technology, energy weapons, force shields, long-range combat. The idea of fighting with primitive weapons seemed insane. You are suggesting we fight bioships with swords? Commander Kyung-ho laughed. That is madness. Is it? Wu Jin asked. Your energy weapons are useless against their adaptive armor. Your ships cannot match their speed or healing abilities. Your technology has failed completely. And human technology would be better? General So-min snorted. Humans do not rely on technology alone, Wu Jin said quietly. We learned long ago that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy is not a plasma cannon or an energy shield. It is a person who refuses to give up, refuses to surrender, and will keep fighting even when victory seems impossible. Ambassador Taeho was looking more nervous by the moment. Wu Jin, the Accords clearly state, the Accords are void if civilian populations are threatened, Wu Jin said firmly. He turned to look directly at Elder Haewon. You asked what happened when the Zephyrians came to Earth 200 years ago. They came with a full battle fleet expecting to harvest a helpless primitive world. And, Elder Haewon prompted, 3 of their bioships made it back to deep space, Wu Jin said simply, out of 300. The chamber erupted in disbelief. The numbers were impossible. A primitive world defeating a major Zephyrian fleet? It could not be true. You are lying, Commander Kyung-ho declared. No primitive world could. We are not primitive, Wu Jin interrupted, and something in his voice made everyone stop talking. We never were. We are something much more dangerous than primitive. We are adaptable. He began walking toward the center of the chamber, and Nari noticed that his movements had changed. The careful, respectful steps were gone. Now he moved like a predator, each step precise and controlled. The Zephyrians expected to find farmers and miners, Wu Jin continued. And they did. But what they did not understand is that human farmers and miners are still human, and humans have one trait that makes us unique in the galaxy. Which is? Elder Haewon asked quietly. We do not know when to quit, Wu Jin said, turning to face the assembled nobles. When something threatens our families, our homes, our children, we do not calculate odds or worry about casualties. We pick up whatever weapon we can find and we fight until either we are dead or the threat is gone. The chamber was completely silent now. Even Ambassador Taeho had stopped trying to interrupt. The Zephyrians learned this the hard way, Wu Jin said. They landed their troops expecting easy prey. Instead, they found 6 billion humans who were very, very angry. We fought them in the cities, in the fields, in the mountains, in the oceans. We used hammers and kitchen knives and garden tools. We used our bare hands when we had to. That is still not enough to defeat bioships, General So-min protested weakly. You are right, Wu Jin agreed. But while we were fighting their ground troops, our engineers were studying their technology, and humans are very good at learning from our enemies. By the time the battle was over, we had not just defeated the raiders, we had learned to build ships that could hunt them. Nari stared at her husband in amazement. This was not the quiet man she had married. This was someone else entirely, someone with authority and knowledge that came from hard experience. You are telling us that humans have a secret space fleet? Elder Haewon asked. I am telling you that humans have been protecting this galaxy for 200 years, Wu Jin replied. We learned that the Zephyrians were not just random raiders, they were scouts for something much worse. So we made a choice. We decided to make sure that the galaxy never had to face that worst thing. Ambassador Tejo finally spoke, his voice heavy with regret. The masquerade is over then? Wu Jin nodded. The masquerade is over. Nari felt the world shifting around her. Everything she thought she knew about humans, about her husband, about the galaxy itself, was changing. The quiet farmer she had married was something far more dangerous and far more complex than she had ever imagined. What do you need? She heard herself ask. Wu Jin turned to her, and for the first time since their wedding, she saw him truly smile. Just permission to call home, he said. The Zephyrian fleet arrived like a storm made of nightmares. Nari stood in the observation deck of Nexus Station, watching the enemy bioships emerge from hyperspace. They were nothing like the clean, geometric vessels of the Vorthak. These ships were alive, pulsing with organic light, their hulls covered in what looked like scales or armor plating that moved and shifted as she watched. The largest ship was the size of a small moon, its surface crawling with smaller craft that looked like parasites feeding on a massive host. This had to be the flagship of Warchief Grixtal, the most feared Zephyrian commander in the galaxy. 67 bioships, Commander Dalsu reported, his voice tight with fear, including 12 heavy assault carriers. We count over 3,000 smaller attack craft. The Vorthak defense fleet looked pitiful by comparison. 23 ships, their silver hulls gleaming in the starlight, arranged in a defensive formation around the station. Nari knew they were doomed. The reports from the outer colonies had made it clear that Vorthak technology was useless against the new Zephyrian weapons. Where is my husband? She asked. He left an hour ago, Mi-young replied.
He said he needed to prepare.
Nari had not seen Wu Jin since the council meeting 3 days earlier. Ambassador Tejo had taken him to a secure communication room where he could call home, as he had put it. Since then, both humans had been locked in constant communication with Earth, speaking in codes and languages that the Vorthak computers could not translate. The battle began badly. The first wave of Zephyrian attack craft swarmed over the Vorthak ships like angry insects. The defenders opened fire with their plasma cannons and energy torpedoes, brilliant streams of light that should have cut through the enemy formations. Instead, the bioships absorbed the energy attacks, their living armor glowing brighter as it fed on the weapons fire. Within minutes, 3 Vorthak destroyers were overwhelmed, their hulls breached by organic weapons that seemed to eat through metal and crystal alike. All civilian personnel to evacuation stations, the station computer announced. This is not a drill. All civilian personnel. The announcement cut off as something struck the station's outer hull. Through the observation windows, Nari could see Zephyrian boarding pods attaching themselves to the station like blood-sucking ticks. Each pod was the size of a small building, and they were designed to burn through hull metal and disgorge troops directly into the corridors. We have to go, Mi-young said, grabbing Nari's arm. The royal evacuation ship is waiting. But Nari pulled away. Where is Wu Jin? Princess, there is no time. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red light. But in that brief moment of darkness, Nari had heard something that chilled her blood. Screaming. Not just the screams of fear, but the wet, horrible sounds of people dying in agony. The Zephyrians were inside the station. Nari ran toward the sound, ignoring Mi-young's shouts behind her. She had to find her husband. Whatever he really was, whatever secrets he had been hiding, she needed to be with him when the end came. The corridors were in chaos. Vorthak civilians fled in panic while security forces tried to maintain order. She could hear weapons fire echoing from the lower levels. The distinctive whine of Vorthak energy rifles mixed with sounds she did not recognize. Organic clicking and hissing that made her skin crawl. She found Commander Dalsu in the main security center, shouting orders at his officers. Behind him, screens showed scenes of horror from throughout the station. The Zephyrians were not just killing people, They were doing things to them that Nari could not bear to watch. "Where is my husband?" she demanded. "I do not know," Dalsu replied without looking away from his screens. "Both humans disappeared hours ago. They could be anywhere on the station." "Sir," one of his officers called out, "we have a massive breach." In Section 7, whatever came through is heading for the main hull. Section 7. That was where Wu Jin did his morning exercises, where she had first seen him moving like a deadly dancer in the empty cargo bay. Nari ran again, her formal dress tearing as she climbed through maintenance shafts and emergency corridors. At the A, sounds of battle grew louder as she descended through the station's levels. She could hear the distinctive roar of Zephyrian war beasts, creatures the size of ground cars with teeth like swords. When she finally reached the corridor outside the cargo bay, she found bodies, not Vorthak bodies. These were Zephyrians. Their organic armor split open, green blood pooling on the metal floor. They had been cut apart with surgical precision, each kill clean and efficient. The door to the cargo bay stood open. Beyond it, Nari could hear the sound of fighting, metal ringing against metal, the wet sound of blade meeting flesh and something else. Singing. Someone was singing in an ancient human language, a low chant that seemed to make the air itself vibrate. She stepped through the doorway and saw her husband, but it was not the Wu Jin she had married. This man wore armor that looked like it had been forged from starlight itself, black metal that seemed to drink in light and reflect it back as something darker. Symbols covered the armor's surface, shifting and changing as she watched, like living text written in a language that hurt to look at directly. In his hands was a sword. The blade was impossible. It cut through the air and left trails of light behind it, as if reality itself was being sliced apart. When it struck the chitinous armor of the Zephyrian warriors surrounding him, there was no resistance. The organic material simply ceased to exist where the sword touched it. Wu Jin moved through his enemies like water flowing downhill, each step perfectly placed, each strike exactly where it needed to be. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. He was death given form and purpose, and the Zephyrians, for all their savagery and bio-enhanced strength, could not touch him. Dictao. Largest Zephyrian was clearly the leader of this group. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, its carapace covered in battle scars and ritual markings. This was a war chief's champion, a creature bred for combat and honed by a lifetime of killing. It charged Wu Jin with a roar that shook the walls. Its claws were the size of daggers, its mandibles could crush steel, its hide could deflect energy weapons. It was everything evolution and genetic engineering could produce in a perfect killer. Wu Jin sidestepped the charge and removed the creature's head with a single stroke of his impossible sword. The body crashed to the floor, green blood spraying across the walls. The remaining Zephyrians hesitated, suddenly uncertain. That hesitation killed them. In the sudden silence that followed, Wu Jin slowly turned to face Nari. For a moment, she did not recognize him at all. The gentle, quiet man she had married was gone, replaced by something ancient and terrible and beautiful. Then he smiled, and she saw her husband again beneath the warrior's mask. "I told you I had old habits," he said softly. Before Nari could respond, the station shook again. More boarding pods were attaching to the hull, and she could hear the sound of cutting tools eating through metal. "How many more?" she asked. "All of them," Wu Jin replied, checking his sword for damage. The blade was unmarked, its edge still. "Perfect. War Chief Grixtal is not one to leave enemies behind. Then we are going to die here." Wu Jin looked at her with those dark, deep eyes that had first caught her attention at their wedding. "Not if I can help it." He reached into his armor and pulled out a small device that looked like a crystal wrapped in metal. With practiced movements, he activated it and spoke a single word in what she now realized was not just an ancient human language, but a military code. The response was immediate. A voice crackled through the air, speaking in accented but clear Vorthak. "This is Admiral Jiho of the Terran Defense Corps. Nexus Station, please identify the source." The voice from Wu Jin's device continued speaking in perfect Vorthak. This is Admiral Jiho of the Terran Defense Corps. Nexus Station, please identify the source of this emergency signal. Wu Jin lifted the device to his mouth. This is Agent Wu Jin. Station is under full Zephyrian assault. War Chief Grixtal commanding, request immediate intervention. Understood, Agent Wu Jin. Help is already on the way. Nari stared at her husband in shock. Agent? You are a spy? Among other things, Wu Jin admitted, sliding the device back into his armor. Though I prefer to think of myself as a guardian. The station shook again as more Zephyrian forces breached the hull. Through the walls, Nari could hear the sounds of battle spreading throughout Nexus. The Vorthak security forces were fighting bravely, but they were not equipped to handle boarding parties of bio-enhanced killers. We need to move, Wu Jin said, checking his sword one more time. Grixtal will be looking for high-value targets. As a princess, you are exactly what he wants. They left the cargo bay and moved through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting. Bodies lay scattered on the floor, mostly Zephyrians, Nari noticed. Whatever other human agents were on the station, they had been busy. How many of you are there? She asked as they climbed through a maintenance shaft toward the upper levels. Enough, Wu Jin replied. Humans have been placing guardians throughout the galaxy for 2 centuries. We learned early that the best way to protect people is to be close to them when danger comes. So your marriage to me was just an assignment? Wu Jin stopped climbing and looked down at her. Even in the dim emergency lighting, she could see the pain in his eyes. The marriage was arranged by our governments, but falling in love with you was never part of the plan. That was real, Nari. That was always real. Before she could respond, they heard footsteps in the corridor above. Heavy clicking sounds that could only belong to Zephyrian troops. Wu Jin motioned for silence and drew his sword. The blade hummed softly, its edge glowing with contained energy. The Zephyrians passed overhead without noticing the maintenance shaft. When their sounds faded, Wu Jin and Nari continued climbing toward the command center. They found Commander Dalsu and his remaining officers barricaded behind overturned tables and emergency barriers. The Vorthak were holding the main corridor, but barely. Their energy weapons were running low on power, and the enemy kept coming in endless waves. Princess, Dalsu called out when he saw them. Thank the stars you are safe. We have evacuation ships standing by. No evacuation, Wu Jin interrupted. Help is coming. What help? General Somin demanded. She had arrived with reinforcements. From the lower levels, her silver armor scorched and dented from fighting. The fleet is gone. The outer defenses are breached. We are alone. Look outside, Wu Jin said simply. Nari moved to the nearest observation window and gasped. The space around Nexus Station was changing. Ships were appearing out of nowhere, materializing from what looked like empty vacuum. But these were not the simple transport vessels that had brought the human delegation months ago. These ships were predators. Long and sleek, they moved through space like living things, their hulls dark as night but somehow beautiful. They were smaller than the massive Zephyrian bioships, but there were dozens of them appearing faster than she could count. Terran Defense Corps, Wolfpack Squadron, a voice announced over the station's communication system. All civilian. Vessels withdraw to minimum safe distance. We are going weapons hot. The battle that followed was unlike anything Nari had ever seen. The human ships moved like a pack of hunters, coordinating their attacks with perfect precision. They did not rely on massive energy weapons like the Vorthak fleet had. Instead, they used speed and cunning, striking at the bioships from unexpected angles and disappearing before return fire could find them. But it was not just the ships that were different. The weapons were something new entirely. Instead of energy beams that the Zephyrian armor could absorb, the human ships fired what looked like solid projectiles that punched through bioship hulls like they were made of paper. Kinetic kill vehicles, Wu Jin explained, watching the battle through the window. We learned that the Zephyrians can adapt to energy weapons, but they have trouble with old-fashioned physics. A chunk of metal moving at 90% of light speed will go through anything. The tide of battle began to turn. The Zephyrian bioships, used to absorbing and adapting to their enemies' attacks, found themselves facing weapons they could not counter. Their living armor was useless against projectiles that simply punched holes through them and kept going. On the station, the boarding parties began to receive new orders. Instead of spreading out to cause maximum damage, they started pulling. Back toward their insertion points, the Zephyrians were preparing to retreat, but Wu Jin was not finished with them. "I need to get to the main hangar," he told Nari. "Grixtal will try to escape when he realizes the battle is lost. I cannot let that happen." "Why not?" "If they are retreating, because he will come back," Wu Jin said grimly. "Grixtal has never been defeated in personal combat. If he escapes, he will spend the rest of his life planning revenge. The only way to end this is to end him." They fought their way through the station toward the main hangar, joined by Commander Dalsu and a squad of his best soldiers. The corridors were littered with debris and bodies, but most of the Zephyrians they encountered were already withdrawing toward their ships. The main hangar was a massive space designed to hold entire fleets of trading vessels. Now it was filled with Zephyrian dropships and assault craft, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns as they prepared for departure. At the center of it all stood War Chief Grixtal himself. Nari had seen pictures of Zephyrian war chiefs, but none had prepared her for the reality. Grixtal was a monster in the most literal sense, standing over 3 meters tall, his carapace covered in ritual scars and trophies taken from defeated enemies. His lower arms ended in claws that could cut through steel, while his upper arms wielded weapons that looked like they had been grown rather than manufactured. Around him stood his personal guard, the largest and most vicious Zephyrian warriors Nari had ever seen. Each one was a veteran of 100 battles, their bodies modified with bio-enhancements that made them faster and stronger than any natural creature had a right to be. Grixtal saw them coming and let out a roar of challenge that echoed through the hangar. In the Zephyrian culture, retreat was acceptable only if preceded by personal combat. The war chief would not leave without testing himself against the strongest enemy he could find. "Human!" Grixtal bellowed in heavily accented Vorthak. "You dare face Grixtal in combat?" Wu Jin stepped forward, his impossible sword gleaming in his hand. "I have faced worse than you, monster, and I am still here." The duel that followed was brief and decisive. Grixtal was everything the Zephyrians could create in a perfect warrior: fast, strong, experienced, and absolutely ruthless. His bio-enhanced reflexes allowed him to strike faster than the eye could follow, and his natural weapons could cut through most known materials. But Wu Jin was something the Zephyrians had never encountered before. He was human, and humans had spent 2 centuries learning exactly how to kill creatures like Grixtal. The war chief's first strike should have cut Wu Jin in half. Instead, the human stepped aside at exactly the right moment and brought his sword up in a perfect counterattack. The blade passed through Grixtal's natural armor as if it were not there, opening a wound that sprayed green blood across the hangar floor. Grixtal roared in pain and anger, launching a flurry of attacks that would have overwhelmed any normal opponent. But Wu Jin was not normal. He moved like water flowing around each strike, never where the claws expected him to be. When the end came, it was almost anticlimactic. Grixtal overextended himself on what should have been a killing blow, and Wu Jin simply was not there to receive it. Instead, he was behind the war chief, his sword already completing its arc through the creature's neck. The massive body hit the floor with a sound like thunder. The remaining Zephyrians stared in shock. Their invincible war chief had been defeated by a small human with an ancient weapon. "Go," Wu Jin said quietly, his sword still humming with energy. "Tell your people what you saw here. Tell them that humanity remembers our old bargain. Tell them we are still watching." The Zephyrians fled. In the days that followed, the galaxy struggled to understand what had happened. The Zephyrian raiders, who had terrorized the outer colonies for centuries, suddenly withdrew to the deepest parts of space. Reports came in of similar retreats all along the galactic rim, as if some signal had gone out telling them to avoid certain areas. The Vorthak Empire found itself in the strange position of owing their survival to a people they had considered primitive. Trade agreements were renegotiated, defense pacts were rewritten, and the entire balance of galactic politics shifted almost overnight. But for Nari, the biggest change was personal. Her quiet, respectful husband was revealed to be something far more complex, a guardian who had spent centuries protecting civilizations that did not even know they needed protection. "Will you stay?" she asked him one evening as they stood on their private balcony watching the stars.